Do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, morrismedialive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, beloved. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. So glad that you are joining us today. We have a jam-packed program planned, and as always, thought-provoking, real, relevant, and solutions-driven. I'm going to be joined by some special guests as we explore our theme for today, anti-blackness and migration, analyzing intersections, organizing resistance. This all is connected with what's happening right now with black migrants in general, but in particularly with our Haitian kinfolk, as we've seen these disturbing images, on so many platforms for the last couple of weeks. Now that we find ourselves in a so-called false normalcy, bridges reopen and in Del Rio, and folk have been cleared from under the bridge, and as always here in the United States, when stuff like that happen, we kind of just go on to the next thing. Well, this crisis continues, and today we're going to explore that with several individuals. I want to start off by just reading a letter that's been finalized and will be going to President Joe Biden in the next couple of weeks from faith leaders as well as racial justice organizations. I want to start off with this letter and then bring in our guests for today. This letter reads as follows, and in part: as faith leaders and racial justice organizations from diverse faith traditions, we denounce the segregationist immigration policies of your administration, President Biden. We share the belief and commitment to the sacredness of all human beings. We continue to be appalled and deeply disturbed by the inhumane, abusive, and cruel response of your administration to the migrant crisis in Del Rio, Texas, and in other places along the border. The actions of the U.S. Border Patrol are violations of domestic and international law. Moreover, it calls into question your commitment to humanely process asylum seekers at the border. Your administration's continued expulsion to Haiti is morally indefensible. While there is a false sense of normalcy in Del Rio right now, your administration continued to aggressively expel thousands of Haitians and other black asylum seekers. We demand that these flights to Haiti immediately stop and be replaced with a clear directive to humanely process asylum seekers at the border. What we have witnessed in Del Rio, Texas, is consistent with previous actions from your administration, disavowing asylum rights and embracing policies that inflict cruelty to black, brown, and indigenous immigrant communities. The commitments that you made, Mr. President, on the campaign trail to uphold the United States domestic and international legal obligation to asylum, to end privatized detention, and to disentangle federal immigration enforcement from local law enforcement, continue to shred before our eyes. We will not forget. These acts of betrayal have clearly resulted in an inflection point for your administration's commitment to a humane, just, and comprehensive immigration reform. Mr. President, we will not forget. And there are several other paragraphs to this, but this is the letter that Clergy for Black Lives penned, and we worked on that together. And we have other, faith leaders and racial justice organizations joining us, in that. I'm glad today to be joined by several members of Clergy for Black Lives and several of our other partners, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, as well as SEIU Local 721 and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California and Clergy for Black Lives. So I want to welcome all of you, and we'll bring you in as we continue our conversation. While we are in conversation, we will share with you images, of some of the actions that has taken place here in Los Angeles, as well as some of the other images that we've seen, going around on several platforms. I want to bring in our first guest, Pastor Q, who is with Church Without Walls in Skid Row, as well as part of Black Lives Matter and Clergy for Black Lives. I want to start with him, because there was a powerful article, Pastor Q, that came out in the Haitian Times, and this article was entitled "What I Saw in the Border Patrol Images." African Americans and Haitians have a shared history. I thought Gary Pierre did an outstanding job creating the intersection for us around what's currently going on, at the border. I want to invite you just to share some perspectives around that as, a black immigrant like myself. You are from the Caribbean. I'm from South Africa. Just your thoughts, around, where we are, what's going on in this ongoing fight around anti-blackness and immigration. Pastor Q? Okay, we're gonna see if we can reconnect with Pastor Q because I think he's in transit around there. Let me see, Pastor Smart.
Hello,
Pastor Q, are you there?
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, all right. Well, as it relates to what's happening, we've always got to go back, right, to why are all these uh, so-called immigrants all over the nation, right? All over the world, all over the Americas. Why are Haitians in Haiti, right? Uh, I say if folks didn't go to Africa and create a transatlantic slave trade, then there wouldn't be a Del Rio, right? So that's the first thing. And one of the things America refuses to do is to take responsibility for the foundations of the issues that we're dealing with today.
Indeed, indeed. And also, not just that, but it's clear that given the long-standing relationship between the United States and Haiti, which I need to mention is, was the first, a free black republic in the Western Hemisphere, and that, of course, was a direct threat to the U.S. because, back then, enslavement and the institution of slavery, was still going on, in the United
Hmm.
States, and it's almost like, given this volatile, vicious, oppressive relationship, exploitative relationship between the U.S., destabilizing history between the U.S., and Haiti, stems from back then. But what
Hmm.
do you see is this intersection in these images, that Gary Pierre describes here, around, horses, whips, and how that then intersects, with the image of slave catchers,
Right,
catching, runaway slaves,
right,
from the
right.
plantation.
Yeah, I know some of my some of my colleagues and some of my comrades are going to touch on that deeply. But I want to really touch on it from the perspective of the Second Great Migration. We
Mm-hmm.
know that during the Second Great Migration, when Black folks were being chased by the KKK, brutalized by the KKK, lynched by the KKK and white mobs, right? It wasn't just the KKK, but it was those who were sympathetic to the plight of the KKK to really uphold white supremacy. We know that during that time, while Black folks were migrating and during the Industrial Revolution, where, those jobs were good jobs, we know that America migrated, Euro America migrated about, or immigrated, or they actually encouraged 1.2 million white poor immigrants from Europe to come to America so they can give them those jobs in the upper echelons of those institutions. And so by the time folks had migrated from the South, all the good industrial jobs were already gone. So the intersectionality is there. And when you think about places like Skid Row, it is deindustrialization. People always say it was Reagan who caused that, but it's deindustrialization that caused that. In the 1940s, during World War II, we had a housing crisis, and that's why Black folks were migrating, from the South and going north and west, and even down south, even further south. Those folks who came west and north were actually moving into places like South Central, and during the Japanese internment, actually migrated into Little Tokyo, and it became known as Bronzeville. So all they're doing is playing musical chairs with bad policies and slave catcher policy all across the nation and all across the world.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't use your term that you've coined, politricks.
Right.
In that statement, around
Yeah.
that, because we have to put all this in context. And I know, our folk from Baji, our organizers from Baji, in a few minutes will help us kind of put all of this into perspective around what's been going on, on the border, because especially with our Los Angeles organizers and staff, we've worked on the San Diego border with our Black migrants there, in Mexico. But I want to bring in Pastor Smart, Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California, and I want to precede my question to him, or invite his comments with a Facebook post that he wrote. Very, very, I could really, feel these words. Pastor Smart, you wrote, especially after, you read a BuzzFeed News, article entitled "Haitians Who Fled the U.S. Border Are Now Facing Nights of Raids and Terror in Mexico." So this is definitely a transnational, collaboration that's happening, steep deeply in anti-blackness. Pastor Smart, you wrote, "Our Haitian sisters and brothers are in crisis, stuck at the border of the United States, being disrespected and shipped back to a country that cannot feed or house them. American immigration policy is an anachronism. I call on the Congressional Black Caucus to fight for Black migrants and asylum seekers. Or does bring me your tide, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be set free only apply to white Europeans? Congressional Black Caucus, what are you going to do?" That's a direct challenge, Pastor Smart. As always, the way we roll here, we both, prophetic, and we are direct in terms of, what we want to envision seeing around that. Any additional thoughts on this, whole challenge, Pastor Smart, especially given the work, the historical work that SCLC has done, as the organization that Dr. King, created. Pastor Smart?
Good morning, Pastor Sauls, and thank you for allowing me to be on the program this morning, and to all my other distinguished colleagues, fighters, co-fighters, co-warriors, that we all are out here in the struggle every day for the liberation of people of color on earth. And that, yes, I was incensed by this, the acts of the border, but as Pastor Q has said, It's the conglomeration of a lot of things that have happened over centuries, and the way that Haitian and other countries of color is treated by the imperialistic methods of America. And so I always like to look at a way, Pastor Sauls, that we can fix things. And one of the things I said in that article is we have to call on the Congressional Black Caucus. They have to fight for a more humane policy on facing African immigrants and of color and immigrants of color. It's real important that they get involved and they develop a policy on Haiti with this administration. Haiti is in trouble. The brothers and sisters that are fleeing here, they flee here as migrants. Migrants is a person that can decide to leave a country for whatever reason, a migrant, and they're fleeing as refugees when there's political unrest, they're being treated, their life is in danger, and that's what's happening in Haiti to many of our brothers and sisters there. With the destabilization of the government and killing of a relatively popular president, and then the acts of God, the earthquake, the recent earthquake, they have reason to flee. And we have opened up the shores to every other immigrant that has come here as a refugee, running from political problems there, in need of something. We have a history of doing it. But when it comes to people of color, Black people of color, it seems to be a serious issue unto whether or not we're going to open the same racism that affects every aspect of our lives is just alive in the immigration policies of America.
Absolutely. And I know Pastor Q had to run to another meeting. Glad he was able to join us, briefly. Thanks so much. Pastor Smart, say a little bit about, I mentioned, earlier on this relationship, as dysfunctional and as destructive as it has been between the United States, and Haiti, especially putting it into a historical context, around one, a revolution took place. It was a sacred resistance that took place. Overthrowing the oppression of France. And we stand on the bold and broad shoulders of those freedom fighters. And then of course the installation then and the support for dictators then such as Papa Doc and Baby Doc, under Colin Powell, the removal of President Aristide. As a South African, I was proud that we provided asylum for President Aristide and his family. Around that, but just some sense around this historical, complex, yet dysfunctional, destructive, relationship between the U.S. I think folk need to just get a sense of that, so that we can know that these things don't happen in a vacuum and isolation.
Yeah, well, Haiti, remember, was found. I mean, the revolution, Toussaint, the overture, and he was, he led them. He had pride, and the country was moving in a positive direction. But again, American imperialism. You said the two names, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, and what they did, and America used them, as America has used other leaders around in these small countries for their own benefits. And then the country did not grow. I mean, the country got some resources, but Haiti never has gotten the resources that other island countries around there has, because they felt of Cuban influence there for a while. But America has used that island, that our brothers and sisters there to such an extent. And so when it comes time for infrastructural help, uh, resources, we're very reluctant to. We haven't done that, and that's why it's so important that I call on the Congressional Black Caucus because that's the body we have. They've all been elected.
Mm-hmm.
Majority black folks in different countries, I mean, different states and congressional districts. And we have to have a policy that is effective in taking care of our brothers and sisters in the world. Just like I'm not going to mention them, every other ethnicity in America takes and fights for their people in other lands around the world. We as a people have got to do it too. We have to have more sensitivity to our sisters and brothers in Africa and in the Caribbean. And the only way we can do it is if the Congressional Black Caucus develop a project and a program and force this government, force the Biden administration to do that.
Absolutely, and that might, mean that we have to come up with a strategic Marshall Plan,
Yeah.
around what needs to happen in Haiti, given the natural and the political disasters that
It,
has, afflicted our sisters and brothers, over there. What you just described, in terms of the Congressional Black Caucus, is really the coming together, as Gary Pierre writes in this article, of African Americans and black immigrants, standing together in unity and solidarity. That was the vision of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration that I had the honor of founding with, Reverend Phil Lawson, and so we're gonna bring in, Maraki, Amsaget, who is the Los Angeles organizer, for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Budgie, to just provide us, with how Budgie continues to create a framework around, anti-blackness, and migration on the one end, but also on the other hand, to see how we can continue to analyze the intersections, and organize for resistance. This analysis of intersections is essential because we have to understand that surveillance on the border is the same as surveillance in our inner cities, right? We have to understand that mass incarceration is connected with mass detention. We have to make these connections, y'all. That is so critical for us to do. We need to realize that U.S. foreign policy towards countries of color, right, has the same foundation strategy as U.S. domestic policy to communities of color here in the United States. All right, we ought not to be bamboozled, by all of this that's going on. The empirical tentacles of the United States work both internally and externally. Let me bring in, Maraki at this time just to give us a sense, Maraki, around the current state, of what's happening around, our work with, black migrants and bridging, what's happening with African Americans, as well as, black immigrants, black migrants around that. And I'm glad that Maraki is joining us, from Las Vegas, where the national, well, let me say Nick, she'll tell us what Nick is all about, is kicking off today. So Maraki, welcome. Glad to have you with us, your perspective, and also, what is Nick and what's about to go down in Las Vegas.
Thank you so much, Pastor Sauls. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for having me. So yes, we are currently at NIC, and NIC stands for the National Immigrant Integration Conference. NIC is the largest conference on immigration in the U.S., and it's powerful and important because it plays this a central role in collecting and convening leaders within the rights movement and leaders from across our movements, right, supporting immigrants and refugees, and allowing us to connect, starting today till Wednesday, October 6th, and allowing us to sort of strategize and envision forward, how we can better make this make this movement progressive for immigrant rights. And this year is particularly special because we have a Black Nick that Baji has been hosting, that Baji will be hosting later today, and that's where all of the Black immigrant rights organizations and leaders will sort of convene and have a more intimate setting where we can discuss that the specific needs of Black migrants within the immigrant network. And before I talk a little too much, I also want to introduce Sancha Tien, who is Baji's Miami organizer as well.
Yes.
She is with us here, Nick, as well. So she's a little jet lag, but here, and I wanted her to also sort of say hello.
Sanche Etienne, welcome, welcome. I'm glad that you're
Greeting, Pastor
joining us.
Soul.
Yeah, I know you flew in late last night, from Miami, um, and straight out of little Haiti over there. So we were glad that you're with us. Sanche, just share some of your thoughts, around this whole deportation piece that's going on. We're going to talk about what our demands are here at some point. You did an excellent, powerful podcast, on the take, where you really just described the inhumane experience that Haitian migrants, right, are experiencing. Because this whole crisis, is 10 years in the making, and so to send folk back now, they've left, between 4 and 6 years ago, around that. Do you want to just share a little bit about, your thoughts around just this whole inhumane experience, and then we'll continue to talk about some of the other work and strategies Baji, is deploying.
Thank you, Pastor Soul. Greetings, and it's a pleasure to be. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here amongst great people talking about, what's right for us, what we want for us Black people. We know that it's been a while that we've been fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's the 21st century. The fight continues. It's unfortunate how we have to get together, and it's not because we want to talk about how to make progress, how to do a new strategy, but it's still to talk about how we want people to treat us with respect and dignity. We know that around the whole thing that's happening at the border, mostly Haitian people are being deported, and it's under this law called Title 42, which is, I call it stupid, excuse my French, but the public, the health industry does not see it the way that this administration. We know Title 42, it's a racist agenda that's being followed, that was here under the Trump administration, and the Biden just picked up, which I feel betrayed by this administration, because they said specifically, President Biden came to Miami in the cultural center. He said that I'm going to stop deportation in my first 100 days in office. That's what he got in his knees and told us in Miami. And for you to hide under Title 42 to say we have to do what's right because deporting the people, it's to protect public health. What? How?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not keeping your promise. These inhuman treatment You should not allow that to happen. And once it's happening, if you see it, you should have just come up and stop it, because you have the power to do so. You are the president of the United States. And to say that these people, their life are in danger. The earthquake in 2010, we have not been recovered from that.
Mm-hmm.
The political instabilities that's happening in Haiti, gang on the streets, killing police, kidnapping people, asking them for a lot of money, which my family was a victim of that. My uncle, who is a they call it Kazek back home, but it's an equivalent of commissioner, who was kidnapped in May. He went through so much for 14 days under these people. So it's like US, the US like show up in the worst kind of way for Haiti. You know that we never get a chance to pick our own president. It's always dictated by the US. Even we go out and vote, but the person that we vote in is never the person in office. If they don't see the person is gonna like being their puppet to do exactly what they want what that person to do, they will not be okay with the person that we vote in office. So therefore, there's a lot going on, but there is one thing that we need to do, and we need to understand that clearly. Until we, as Black people, come together as one, it doesn't matter if you are Haitian, if you are African American, if wherever that you are from Africa, from anywhere, unless we understand that we must come together, put our own strategy together, because the US will not make it happen for us. They will not do it for us. Mm-hmm. We have to save ourselves. That's what I would say about this whole thing that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. In that podcast, Sancha, you talked about a Haitian migrant who left Chile 4 years, and just talks about the experience. I think sometimes we don't get a sense of what people are going through. Do you want to just say a little bit about what you shared on that podcast, and then we're going to encourage people to go and check it out. The podcast is called The Take. So just go and
yes.
Check it out, and also it's on the Baji, Twitter, feed. But say a little bit about what you shared there about that experience.
Sure. This specific migrant was on the bridge, Texas. Mm-hmm. They have him in, and it's not just him, but there were like 12 of them. These 12 specifically, they come from this area that I'm from in Haiti. And when they got under the bridge, there's a group chat that they are part of that I created with a bunch of others to help people, young children in our zone in Haiti, to help them go to school, to help them, with school stuff. And they were under the bridge, but this specific person by the name of Daniel, he went to Chile 4 years ago, and things are not really great over there. He left, and he said that the rent only, to pay for rent, it's around $400 to $500, and they're getting like $200 per month for work, and so they have to come together, a group staying in one house, so that they may be able to afford just rent, so not including other things that they need to do on a daily basis. So he left Chile and took the road and come and become one of these people that we don't have a number. They said between 10 to 15,000, mostly Haitian, but now it went all the way up to 20,000. We don't have a specific number. However, he was processed through immigration, and they told them that they're gonna put them in a detention center and wait for them to be released to family. They're gonna make them call the families and stuff. But that did not happen the way they told him. He went, they put him in a room with, that's with his own words, in a room where 100 people in a room. This room should be holding like 10 people, and it was 100 of them. They were chained up. They had chain in their hands, chain on the feet. They could not move, and they give them some water and apple to eat. That was basically their food. And then after 4 days in that place, they put them in a car. They went, he said they went to New York, they went to New Jersey, they went to different places with them in different facilities. And finally, after these 4 days going around and stuff, they went to a private airport and deported them. And while they were like having them to get out of the car, they pushed them, and that specific person, Daniel, he lost one of his teeth, and he was saying, "This is something that I never want to experience in my life again." But yet, as my conversation with him back home, because he lost his phone, so I did what I had to do and make sure that he got a phone. So now I'm in contact with him on a daily basis. But he said, "I do not want to stay in Haiti because I don't see what I'm gonna do. What's there for me to do?" So he says, "I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to stay. That's one thing I know I'm not going to do, is staying in Haiti the way it is right now." So
Yeah, yeah. I think we talk a lot about policy and all, but this is really a humanitarian crisis, and we can never take away the human experience, the human pain, the human disaster. So really appreciate you just connecting that for us. I'm going to ask Meraki to prepare herself to share with us what's next, and to maybe articulate for us the demands that we have. But I do want to bring in another one of our critical and vital partners in this work, especially for us here in Los Angeles, and that is SEIU, Local 721. And so glad to have my brother and my comrade Felipe Caceres here. He is the coordinator here, with SEIU Local 721, and has been with us as we continue to bridge, unity and solidarity between, Black and brown communities. The union, SEIU, has played a key role. I remember, Felipe, us going down together, to Tijuana, to the San Diego, the U.S.-Mexico border here in Southern California. And the work that we did all day there, with members from SEIU. We had Clergy for Black Lives there. We had the Black Alliance for Just Immigration there. Haitian Breach was there, and we clearly saw the sense of anti-blackness in the disparity of how black migrants were treated and other migrants. That's kind of real for us. So but we're doing this work together. So Felipe, if you can just talk with us, share with us a little bit about SEIU's framework around this, its commitment, and its collaboration with us in this work of anti-blackness and migration. Felipe?
No, absolutely, and thank you again, Reverend Sauls, for having me on this morning. SEIU has been fully committed to a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks here in this country, but our work continues and is outside of this country also. As Reverend Sauls talked about, our Black and Brown Clergy Alliance, and our African American Caucus and our Latino Caucus worked together to bring some of our nurses down along with clergy to the border when there was an original Central American migrant crisis. And when we got down there, we saw our Haitian and Cameroonian and Nigerian brothers and sisters that were stuck at the border, along with our Central American comrades and folks from Chile and folks from Argentina. And so our union recognized that the Black and Brown migrant crisis was linked, and that if we didn't fight together, it was extremely likely that we would lose. And so with that first trip down to the border, we continued to work with Baji, the Haitian Bridge Alliance, our African American Caucus, and Latino Caucus together to make sure that we advocated not just for the folks who everybody advocates for, right? The dreamers and folks who are very simple to advocate for. We wanted to advocate for our asylum seekers, folks who are seeking political asylum, folks who are refugees from crisis that the US created. Our union has been on the forefront of a lot of these issues. We organized the Justice for Janitors, who are mainly Central American and Mexican immigrants. We organized home care workers and child care workers in the Midwest that are mainly Haitian, Cameroon, and our African and Asian brothers and sisters who have migrated here from the Philippines and China and Thailand. So our union is fully committed to defending asylum seekers at the border, and we're extremely disappointed in this administration's continued use of Title 42. And my sister Sancha mentioned it, Meraki is going to continue to mention it, but we as a union, not just our local represents 98,000 public sector workers, but our international union represents over 2 million workers around the world. We have denounced the Biden administration's use of Title 42 and have demanded that these Haitian migrants get the asylum that they deserve. And so we're here to stand with Baji and the Haitian Bridge Alliance as long as it takes to make sure that we get asylum and TPS for not only our Haitian brothers and sisters, because as my comrade said, they think that these folks are Haitian. We need our Cameroonian brothers and sisters. We need all of our asylum seekers at the border to be recognized. So again, thank you, Reverend Sauls, for having me here. And it's just an honor to be on the front lines with all of you doing this work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's always a joy to see you, man, making sure that we have sound and have that bed truck and the stage that Pastor Smart loves to be on, and Pastor Q being our pastor DJ during that time. We do want to mention, of course, the collaboration with CLU, Clergy and Laity United for Equity, and glad to be a part of that Black and Brown, a clergy alliance that we all are a part of in this very, very important work. Meraki, we do have some clear demands. We have some. We're not just about resistance. We're about reimagination. And so that's very, very important. This is a moral crisis, that we're dealing with, and there is a path out of this, a clear path out of it, if we can just get the political will, out of Washington, D.C. And again, Mr. President, we will not forget. Here are some of the demands, that we are looking for. The executive director of Baji has been in Washington, D.C. in several meetings with several, of the administration leaders. This week, we connected with, the Black Church Pact to begin to bring in a broad coalition, of Black churches and Black faith leaders, as well as connecting with Faith in Action, the largest, faith-based organizing, organization here in the United States. So forces are aligning around the following demands. Meraki, would you just share some of those demands so we can make sure that we are all on one accord?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Pastor Sauls. I think it's important to note that all of these four demands that I'm about to share really fall under the line and idea that the US government just must treat Haitian and all other Black asylum seekers with compassion and dignity. That's what all of these demands are really pointing towards. And so the first demand that Baji has stated is that the Biden administration and Secretary Mayorkas of DHS immediately grant humanitarian parole to Black asylum seekers at the US and Mexico border. So we know that while humanitarian parole is a temporary measure, it would allow asylum seekers the opportunity to seek asylum in the US as allowed by international humanitarian law. So that's the main demand we have, is that we immediately grant humanitarian parole to all Black asylum seekers. The second demand that Baji has stated is that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas immediately stop expelling and deporting Haitian and other Black asylum seekers. These asylum seekers have the human rights, again, under US and international law, to seek asylum in the US. And the US is violating those rights when it's further and continues to expel and deport asylum seekers. And these are especially egregious because, again, these asylum seekers aren't being given a hearing before they're being sent back to the terror and violence that they fled in their home countries. And they're not all Haitian, right? So they're, again, as stated before, there are people who are being deported to a nation that they didn't even come back, that they didn't even come from. So we need to immediately put an end to these deportations and expulsions. And then the third demand that we have is immediately revoke the racist Title 42 order. My comrades here have already spoken on it, so I won't take up too much time to further say it. It's a speak on this, but I did want to, emphasize that on September 6th, a federal judge ordered that the Biden administration stop using Title 42 to expel families who are seeking asylum. But instead of processing Black asylum seekers, the Biden administration is continuing to deport them in betrayal of its promise to create fair and humane border policy. So again, immediately revoke Title 42. And then the last of these demands is that the Biden administration immediately end the metering system that's being used to process asylum seekers at the border. This is a made-up metering system that pretty much has asylum seekers take a ticket, take a number, and wait to be called on. And this wait to be called on at the border, right? And this is disproportionately impacting Black migrants and asylum seekers at the border because they are being forced to wait for several months and for some even years at the border, waiting for a chance to be allowed in. This is particularly challenging for Black LGBTQIA asylum seekers who are being especially targeted with violence and discrimination. So in these four demands, which again are grant humanitarian parole, stop expelling and deporting Haitian and other Black migrants, immediately revoke Title 42, and end the metering system. These four demands really are just asking that the US honor international law and treat Haitians and other Black asylum seekers with humanity. With these demands, I would like to share some next steps. Is that all right with you, Pastor Sauls?
Please do, Meraki.
Thank you so much. So we have an upcoming National Week of Action that Baji is hosting, that our Until We're Free coalition is campaigning for, and we want to encourage people to join and participate in this National Week of Action for Black migrants. The week of October 11th, right? So 11th through the 15th, we're asking that any and all who are able to participate and who care and want to see the advancement and the caring of our Haitian and Black asylum seekers in the U.S., please do join our National Week of Action. I know Los Angeles will be hosting actions on Tuesday and throughout the week as well, throughout different counties. And I want to give our sister Sancha a chance to share what's going to be going on in Miami, because that's especially going to be special actions there as well. But I also wanted to share that you can follow up with what we are doing and the actions that we're taking on our toolkits, right? So there's the toolkit for Haitian asylum seekers, which is bit.ly/urgent action for Black migrants. That's bit.ly urgent action for Black migrants, and then for you to continue in joining us during the week of action, please tap into the toolkit bit.ly/NWA Partner Toolkit. That's National Week of Action Partner Toolkit. bit.ly/NWA Partner Toolkit. I'll give it to Sancha now to share what's going to go on in Miami during our National Week of Action.
Yeah, so as Sanjay prepares herself to come on, we want to let folk know that this week in action really is a both and strategy. There will be an action in Washington, D.C. We're working on that right now. And we are inviting folk, and Meraki, just give us the date for that so that our folk in D.C., can be aware of that. In addition to that, we're inviting folk to organize actions where you are. We understand everybody cannot come, to Washington, D.C., and that's why we're in Los Angeles. Meraki is leading us on the plans for us here in Los Angeles with our coalition that we have here with SEIU 721, CLU, Clergy for Black Lives, and others, as well as in Atlanta, Kansas City, they're looking at doing something. Chicago going to do something, and of course Miami. So Sanche, you want to tell us a little bit about what's going to be going down in Miami?
Definitely. This week of action, we're gonna work on it as like a coalition week of action. Like all the organization down there is we're gonna sending the survey out to them to be part of this National Week of Action, and then we're gonna end it. It says from the 11th to the 15th, but we in Miami extended for the whole weekend because we picked October 17th to have a big march in Miami, include everybody. The reason why we picked October 17th, there was a specific reason. October 17th is the assassination of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was a leader of the Haitian Revolution, and under the leadership of Dessalines, Haiti became the first country to permanently abolish slavery. So that's why we picked the 17th to have a big march in Miami, and we are planning to make them hear our voices, our demands, and stand up. We're gonna rise, and until victory, it has to be on our side because we are the people, we are the voices. We got this, so we're gonna be on the ground doing and asking for what's right, do right by the immigrant people. And Pastor Soul, I want to mention also the Title 42. It was supposed to be expired 4 days ago. And when it ended, before it ended, the Biden administration appealed it. And unfortunately, they got it. So they have the right to keep on expelling people from the U.S. under this cruel law they call Title 42.
Yeah.
Just wanted to mention that.
No, thanks for that. And I think, we have to, kind of connect the dots here, right? That is that Title 42 is a carryover from the Trump administration. So just to mention Trump administration, we ought to know, given the anti-Black sentiment, the anti-Black commitment, the anti-Black disposition of the Trump administration, that law is inherently racist and inhumane. And by mentioning that law expired and the Biden administration, now it's the Biden administration's law, and that is betrayal. We also have to mention that the metering system is a carryover from the Obama administration, right? that racist, system that was created, under, President Barack Obama and then Vice President Joe Biden, that still continues, and that's why that's also one of the, demands that we're working on. So we got to make these connections. These things do not happen in isolation, folks. We got to connect the dots of institutional racism, period, around that. I'm glad Miami, of course, is taking it to a whole nother level by extending the week of action to the 17th. Very important date. Thank you for that, historical lesson, there, Sanche. Really appreciate that. I want to bring in Pastor Smart again. Pastor Smart, as we've been on the ground working on all of these demands, so glad to see, SELC as a part of this, really, living into the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But not just that, one of, the words that he used in writing the letter from Birmingham jail was, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I always connect that with a deep sense of mutuality in terms of who we are as kin around the world, including with creation. And then also with that, that's really, for me, a port of entry to, what Ubuntu is all about, because we are all, again, inextricably linked, right, in a single garment, in destiny. Your thoughts on these demands and just SCLC's commitment, to how we continue to press on, to fight forward, and to move us towards beloved community.
Yes. In fact, I was reviewing a sermon last night that I preached about we are all inextricably tied together, and how our destinies for Black people, particular, we that's why I was so adamant earlier about how we have to bring in various other organizations like the Congressional Black Caucus on the political. But we on the ground, we have to continue this organizing that we're doing. And you're right, those demands are important. It shows that we are demanding respect, we're demanding action, and we're not going to, every administration, Democratic administration I've been a part of in some capacity, there always comes an issue that is almost like a do or die issue for me, that you really have to determine who you are. At the time that there was our brothers and sisters was under the bridge, it's the same time you're fighting for infrastructure vote to get your budget Biden. But to us, the important thing was the moment, the urgency of that moment was our brothers and sisters coming in this country living under a bridge. Mm-hmm. Now, you've sent some of them home, but the important thing is it shows that your policy has to be a relevant policy, a policy that affects all people. And that's what that meaning of what King says to me, that I have to stand for injustice against injustice everywhere. I have to stand for everyone having humanity every place. They're absolute terms. They're not just isolated, but they're absolute. So that's why SCLC is in this. We're going to stay in it. Sister Meraki knows that. That SCLC stands with Baji. You know that, Pastor Sauls. We're going to be there, and we're looking at our capacity of whether we go to Washington or we stay here and be involved in the issue and the movement here during that time, that week of action. But we're with you, and thank you for allowing me to be on this show. I have to get in the pulpit in a minute. God bless y'all so much, Pastor Sauls.
Okay.
And and let me just say, you have to have the right allies. And SEIU 721 on this issue is they were talking about the border, going down there to Mexico to deal with that there were Haitian problems. Martine and Felipe have been talking about that for almost 2 years. And, they've always looked at what I've appreciated. They always looked at it's not just a brown immigration issue, but it's a black and brown, yellow, red immigration issue. And I can appreciate that about them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're handing that baton over to Felipe. Felipe, as you listen to those demands, we know that SEIU has been there with us. It was so powerful for me and Pastor Q and others to be part of that first trip down, and I can't again get it out of my head what we've seen, but even going through the border posts and what they put us through, that day, and how Bishop Mendez just worked with us to maintain our cool and our dignity, as we went through the border, because those Mexican border officers just wanted to figure out ways to dissuade us, humiliate us, intimidate us, but we fought the good fight and got on the other side, and was glad to do that. And Budgie continues to get down there once a month. So Felipe, just your thoughts around these demands and how SEIU, CLU, and all of our other partners will continue to stand in the gap and fight forward on these demands.
Absolutely. No, and thank you, Reverend Smart and Reverend Sauls and Baji, for your work. I apologize. I'm running around this morning. I'm heading to the NIC, and so I'm trying to get stuff done with my family. So just forgive me if I have a bad connection. But our locals' commitment came from, as Reverend Sauls and Pastor Smart said, when we went down with our nurses before COVID, about 2 years ago, to the border to bring some medical supplies and some faith leaders down to folks who were seeking asylum. And when the Mexican government treated us like we were coming down to commit crimes, was when, for our local, we realized we needed to start putting our work and our words into action, and getting down to the border and making sure that we connected these issues. For a lot of our Latino brothers and sisters, they did not realize the connection between our struggles from Central Americans coming up to the United States and that struggle of our Cameroonian brothers and sisters that were stuck at the border, or our Haitian brothers and sisters that were stuck at the border that were going to Chile, as my sister said earlier, and coming all the way up from Chile to the United States. And so making these connections for our members was so important, taking these trips with our nurse members, because when you see it with your eyes, you can't unsee it. You see that connection forever. And so our union is committed to this fight, but these demands, right, are so basic. Ending Title 42 through the Trump administration's racist immigration policies is a baseline. We're talking about the first step. And so our union is committed to this because it not only affects our members and our members' families, but the basic dignity that this country stands for. And so we're going to continue to fight for this. And our members are going to continue to go down to the border, stay connected with our refugee and asylum seekers until they come into this country. And the first folks that they'll see when they come into LA County or Southern California are going to be our social worker members, are going to be our caseworkers that can help folks get services once we're able to get them an asylum application, once we're able to get them on that pathway to citizenship in this country that they deserve.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Felipe. Really appreciate that. As we make our way, to closing our time together, I do want to give, Meraki and Shante, Shansha the opportunity for some final comments. And I want to preface the comments, with one of my favorite, proverbs from Haiti, as one who's been to Haiti 3 times, in the work that I've done since I've been in seminary or grad school, and continue to do so. And it connects for me very much to, some of the words that, Nelson Mandela, said. Nelson Mandela said, after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. Haiti, put a whole new spin on that. Of course, that's before, Nelson Mandela said this. The Haitian proverb says, "Beyond mountains, there are mountains." And I know there are a gazillion ways of interpreting this, but one thing that this proverb certainly demonstrate is the resiliency and the fortitude of our Haitian our brothers and sisters, and it sometimes expresses the idea that opportunities are inexhaustible, and sometimes as a way of also saying that when you surmount one great obstacle, you merely gain a clear view of the next one. That's really been the life of our Haitian sisters and brothers. But that proverb is also just a powerful and beautiful description of the topography, of Haiti. The beautiful mountains, the plateaus, that it has, and so given that in terms of beyond mountains, there are mountains. We keep climbing, on even if it means that we're climbing on the rough side, of the mountains. With this in mind, let me, ask, my sister Etienne, to just share some final thoughts around that, and then I'll ask Maraki, to do the same, and also give us those links again, for the toolkit as well as the Baju website. And so, do you want to go first, Shanta?
Definitely, Pastor Soul. Thank you. It is a pleasure to talk to you this morning. And in Creole, "Deye mon gen mon." Um, it's a powerful proverb, and of course, as immigrant, we are resilient. We don't give up, and you're gonna come up with things to put in our ways to stop us from climbing that mountain, but we're gonna push through. And believe it, when we all push through and we get on top of that mountain, you better watch out. You need to watch out. So therefore, what's happening, it's not something new. It get worse. It's not something new. We did it once, we can do it again. We will do it again. So it's just a matter of uniting ourselves, put ourselves together, put all our strategies together, and make sure that we do what we call a nice plot. Okay, because every bad things that are happening, they do it through a plot, but it's bad. But if we choose this word plot and put it in a good perspective and our strategy around it, believe it, we're gonna make it through and make it through soon. And the victory is in our side. We are the people.
Absolutely. It's a long walk to freedom. Maraki, some final thoughts, and then also just again those links that folk can get the toolkit on, and also give us the Baju website, because we know folk can also go there and get some more information.
Absolutely. And I just want to thank you again, Pastor Sauls, for having me join this esteemed panel tonight, this morning. One final thought I wanted to share. One of the things that sort of prevents us from doing this work and fighting is fatigue, right? Fatigue that we get from constant anti-Blackness in the news and in our lives. So I just want to ask that folks, instead of being fatigued, use that righteous anger, use that love for your people that you have, especially when you've experienced or witnessed anti-Blackness, like we have with those horrific images of Haitian migrants, right, being harassed and attacked by Border Patrol. We ask that you use that righteous anger to continue this fight and to not give up, to not fight. Something our ED says, Nana Jemfi, all the time, that I love to repeat, is until the most marginalized, right, of the least privileged is freed, none of us are free. Mm-hmm. So we ask that you continue fighting and that you use these toolkits to help you fight, and join us during that week of action. So again, kit that you can use for talking points on what's going on with Haitian migrants is bit.ly urgent bit.ly/urgent action for Black migrants. That's bit.ly/urgent action for Black migrants, all one word. And then the toolkit you can use to get tapped into what we are doing with this National Week of Action is again bit.ly/NWA Partner Toolkit. bit.ly/NWA Partner Toolkit. So please do stay tuned in and don't stop, right? Keep the pressure on and let's continue fighting for our siblings. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I am so proud of our leadership at the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. You all do me proud as one who, started this organization many years ago. And so I just want to say, Maraki and Sante and everyone there, Nana, you guys are doing an extraordinary work, and we continue to build, we continue to grow, at this intersection, of anti-blackness and migration. So I know you guys had Nick Felipe is on his way, so we pray for safe travels for him and for everybody who's traveling to, Las Vegas. Felipe, if you're still there, prayers for you, man, and safe travels
So much.
for all of
It's
you that are
always an
going
honor
there.
to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining, man. Appreciate you much, and looking forward to hearing all the reports from Nick and watching all the platforms for what's going to be going down. I know Black Nick is going to be off the chain as we shed light on what's been going on around, the Black migrant crisis, as we move forward. So thank you, everyone, for being here with us. We want to just quickly share a few, announcements with you of some events coming up, and I'm going to ask Felicia just to put those, up for us, and then I'll have some closing remarks for us. Please take note, of the event that's coming up, this week, the Links Incorporated, the Inglewood Pacific chapter. This is part of a initiative that I've been a part of, Compassion for the Caribbean Humanitarian Initiative. We need to know that there has been, some natural disasters in Haiti. We of course deal with political disasters too, but that earthquake that took place, just about 10 years ago, and then the recent one, relief is still needed. And so there will be a press conference that's going to be, taking place this week around that. We want to thank, the Links Incorporated, that Inglewood chapter, for the work that they are doing. This afternoon, join us for the Black Hollywood Educational Resource Center. We're doing, we're tackling voter repression that's going on. We're doing a free screening of a powerful movie, one of my heroes, Otis Moss, is a part of it. That's the second. This movie has been directed and produced by Otis Moss III, who's the senior pastor, of, the Trinity United Church of Christ, in Chicago. And so that one is for young people. Starts at 2:30, young people and students. And then, we're finishing up the Faith Film Festival that's coordinated, by the Black Hollywood Educational Resource Center. That's today at 4 p.m. So please check it out, www.bherc.tv. We have about 6 pastors that will be sharing some of these faith films that's been in the festival, and also have a roundtable conversation, about that. And then this is a very important announcement on behalf of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California. We are in a power alert. It is so important, folk, that we preserve power, flex your power, in terms of your usage at home, and save, our power from going out. The power is in your hand. So flex your power, as we do all of that. It's all part of what I call environmental holiness, right? And so we urge you, to do that. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank all of our guests for being, with us. Allow me to lift up the following closing remarks based on our theme for today. The time has come and is now that we must connect the intersectional dots of institutional racism and bridge the ongoing fight against anti-blackness in America. No human being is illegal. Racism, in all its manifestations, is evil. Glad that you were with us, and looking forward to you joining us, the next time here on Faith Without Borders. And I'm glad to always be your host. I am, Pastor Kelvin Sauls, and thanks so much for joining us today. Keep on keeping on, and let us fight forward until we arrive at beloved community. Peace out.